Hi everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. In today's video, we're talking about some really cool data mined information that can point us towards very likely what are going to be the final two factions, right? These two hidden factions that are part of the Nyresen Union. And I'm also going to talk about why I think that we will see, I think this first one, basically Wood Elves, coming to the game, I think, probably pretty damn soon. So let us dive in, right? So believe it or not, a lot of this data mining actually came from back in November of 2020, which is kind of crazy, right? That was quite a while ago, but we can see that a lot of it has actually come true. We've got these three right here, these three faction banners, which obviously aren't currently in the game. Now, the first one that we want to look at is this one right here. We have this Japanese sort of theme with the kunai, the throwing knives, the kabuki mask. This was obviously the precursor to, well, the Shadowkin faction, right? This was before the Shadowkin came out. This was what was data mined. And certainly we can see that it has been updated. They have a different design since then. But that general sort of theme of the Shadowkin as this sort of Asian, very much more so focused on the Japanese side of it, I would say, overall. But a real theme about ninjas and sneakiness and all that sort of stuff. That's very much what has come true of the Shadowkin in-game. Now, we have these other two as well. I think, first of all, one of the really interesting things, I have to give a huge shout out to YouTuber Salt, by the way, who did a video on this. And I think it's one of the only videos on the topic way back in 2020 when this stuff initially came out. But one of the things he noticed and talked about in his video was how actually barbarians, according to this data mined info, were actually supposed to be part of this Nyresen Union faction and not part of the Tolarian Union faction, where they are right now in the game. What happened here? I think what happened is pretty straightforward. Of course, when the game first released, we didn't have Shadowkin. We didn't have dwarves either. They simply weren't in the game. And rather than putting barbarians in here all alone in the Nyresen Union and having Tolarians missing one faction, they decided to put the barbarians in there instead. It's quite interesting. We can look at the themes of these factions. And certainly when we come down to Nyresen, we'd have dwarves. We would have, if we go by this, we would have had barbarians, dwarves, the Shadowkin, and then what I'm saying is going to be the Wood Elves. And you can definitely see the theme of this, like quite neutral, pretty decent, you know, in terms of your typical fantasy. They're kind of the good guys, right? They're not bad, but they're also not strictly like lawful good either. Like, let's say the High Elves or the Bannerlords. Arguably the Sacred Order would be a bit more zealous, you know, and then we'll talk about this faction in a little bit. But if we dive into a couple more of the data mining things, here's something that might convince you even more. If you're a bit skeptical that, hey, okay, they could have just faked those banners, right? But they look very legit. These are the actual icons for accessories for the different factions. But check these out. Let's zoom in. We have a Nyresen Union, Nyresen Elves banner. You can see the name up here, Nyresen Elves banner. Looks pretty legit, right? How do I get onto the next one? I guess I have to click through manually, huh? We have the Nyresen Elves pendant. Again, looking legit, the necklace. And the Nyresen Elves ring. Just the quality of these art assets makes me very convinced that these are real. Like, these are easily on par and completely matching in style with the typical raid stuff, right? We go into faction icons. We have, obviously, you know, all the faction icons here. What is this over here? We have Nyresen Elves, right? These three arrows crisscross, that green color. I'm pretty convinced that this is very legit, and this was their original plan. One fun thing I want to show you as well is this. This is from Total War Warhammer 3, which I've been playing a lot recently. I really enjoy. These are all the different races, the different factions in that. And we've got tons of overlap with the factions in Raid Shadow Legends. Really no surprise. They draw very heavily off of each other. So, I mean, the Lizardmen are the Lizardmen. We have like Skaven and Beastmen sort of combined to the Skinwalkers. We have like Vampire Counts and Vampire Coasts sort of come together into the Undead Hordes. Tomb Kings sort of part of that as well. They're more ancient Egyptian sort of. So we don't quite have that in the game right now. But yeah, we've got Knights Revenant would be sort of like the Warriors of Chaos. We'd have Grand Cathay, a Chinese-themed faction, brand new in Warhammer 3. Quite similar to the Shadowkin, really, though more of a Chinese slant as opposed to the Shadowkin's Japanese slant. Khorne, Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, they all come together under the Demon Spawn. Bretonnia and the Bannerlords, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea, dwarves and dwarves. But look at this. We've got High Elves, Dark Elves, and Wood Elves. Wood Elves are in there as well. So this leads me very strongly to believe that this could be something that could happen, right? what would this faction be? What would this Wood Elf faction be like? Hopefully not just a bunch of different elves being very similar, but I think in terms of theme, we have room for, like Ents from Lord of the Rings, right? Treants, tree people, basically. We've room for centaurs, for fairies, stags, that sort of thing. Basically, that theme being good guys that really draw upon nature, which isn't something we really have in the game right now. We don't have that sort of nature theme, right? Nature magic. You think about night elves from World of Warcraft, shape-shifting into bears, druids, all that sort of theme. It's not really in there. I guess we have some nature with the Galian Pact. They're quite a natural faction, but they're also kind of more on the bad guy scale of things, right? They're not quite as benevolent as well. What else? Not necessarily benevolent, but you get the idea. I think, for example, one cool thing, this is Ariel. She's like the queen of the Wood Elves. I think this would give you a cool idea for the sort of character that I think would fit very well in Raid and set it apart from the other elf factions. That more fairy, more ethereal, magical. I think it could be quite interesting. Why do I think this is coming soon? We'll talk about the other faction, that other mystery faction after. Let's put on the tinfoil hat for a minute, right? Let's dive into this. So these are the fusions that have happened in the game. We're actually missing, this is Ayumi Love's website. He hasn't updated it with the current Nari the Lucky fusion, right? But we check out some of the consistent themes, particularly from really Pixniel onwards. There's some very, very consistent themes here. Even, from Elegaius onwards, very consistent themes. But specifically, what I want to point out, we've got Elegaius, so the Halloween, words failing me, Halloween fusion matching Vlad. Then we had an Epic and Burgoth matching Vildrax. Then we have like Pixniel and Tatora. So we got the Christmas fusion, right? The Christmas fusion, okay. Then we come into January. What do we have? Iron Brago and Operdin Clanfather. Again, the two sort of clan boss daddies, all about keeping you alive, supporting your team, these really tanky, really manly champions, yeah? Then in February, what do we have? We have Astralon and Karato Foxhunter. What are these two sorts of champions? They're both arena nukers that are part of this Valentine's idea, these couples, right? So Astralon with Countess Lix, yeah? Really good in arena. Karato Foxhunter and Yumiko, really good in arena, right? The two going together. Very similar sort of style. Then we have Yoshi the Drunkard, and then, of course, going alongside the equivalent now being Nari the Lucky, right? He just finished his fusion. I'm going to be summoning him tomorrow during our Clan v Clan live stream, most likely, for personal rewards. But he's coming in. Both sort of St. Patrick's Day themed, right? Nari being kind of like a leprechaun. And both really focused on this idea of like accuracy, right? Control and accuracy. So really, I think it's quite interesting when we look at the style of champion that we've had in these fusions. There's really very, very similar overlaps in terms of the style and the theme. Now, one of the things that Yoshi did, what was Yoshi? He was the first fusion for the Shadowkin, really introducing the Shadowkin faction. Obviously, Nari the Lucky's not doing that, but could the next fusion be doing it? I think it's possible. I actually saw just before I started recording, there was a bunch of stuff about Raid's 3rd anniversary. They just released a little teaser clip for that. So we got this big anniversary coming out. But what happened in April? What was the April fusion last year? The April fusion last year was what many people consider to be the best fusion of all time, the strongest fusion of all time, under Priest Brogni. An absolutely incredible support champion that revolutionized many people's teams. People went all out to get this guy. It was an extremely difficult fusion, but he was super powerful, insane for clan boss, all the rest. I'm expecting, number one, based on the consistency here, I'm expecting a similar sort of champion to under Priest Brogni. And frankly, I think I wouldn't be shocked if they came out and were like, okay, we're going to bring out some incredible reviver or support champion that's going to be great for arena and maybe even Hydra on a power level equal to under Priest Brogni. Something like completely insane to really just... especially when you think about it, that we've had some pretty crazy events like the Krisk tournament, the 3rd anniversary, which is probably going to be happening this week. Info on that when I have it, which could have really crazy rewards and crazy events, really drain people of resources, then hit them with a super powerful fusion. I think it would make sense if they tied it in with the release of a new faction. But I don't know. We'll see. What do you guys think about that? Now, the other one I want to talk about, I don't have it open quite yet. We want to come back here. What is the other faction? What would this faction be? right? This one here, this sort of hand. Well, first of all, we're bearing in mind that this faction would be part of the was originally going to be part of the Talarians, right? So we're thinking pretty human-like, right? Quite normal, quite relatable, quite sort of lawful good sort of faction. But we're expecting there's probably going to be a bit of a rework to it now, since it's going into the Nyrusin Union instead. And my bet for what this faction could be, it definitely has, if we look at this, it's definitely got a very magical feel to it. It's like a scroll with writing on it, an eye and a hand. Definitely very magical. I'm wondering if they might swing it in a slightly different direction and go into something like this, right? Something like this. I'm particularly looking at the Vi part of this. If you guys watch Arcane, right? This was the Riot Games, the League of Legends animated a show. Hextech, right? Hextech, magical technology. I'm wondering if that might be something that they start to draw on more. You can see with Vi, she punches stuff. What does she have? She has this sort of infinity gauntlet style thing, sort of magically powered gauntlet, sort of steampunk, bit futuristic, but using magic to power it. And yeah, like they've got other things like, guns and rocket launchers, all that sort of stuff, but with a more fantasy theme. When I go back to Total War, I go back to Warhammer Fantasy, what do we have? Believe it or not, the most popular faction in the entire game is, where are they? I'm blind, apparently. The Empire, right? The Empire, the humans. The humans are in there. What did the humans, the Empire, do in Warhammer? Well, I mean, they're kind of normal humans going up against, demons and ogres and all this sort of stuff. They have a lot of artillery. They have a lot of guns. It's basically, what do the humans do? They got some pretty terrible human troops. But hey, we got a bunch of guns and we build a bunch of rockets and artillery. They have steam tanks. They have things like luminarcs, which are like sort of magic cannons. Crazy stuff going on there. Again, I think this idea of a more sort of steampunk faction would actually fit in really well. This sort of, it's that fantasy trope, that neutral city of magic, right? Independent city of thinkers, of scholars, more advanced, more futuristic, but a bit isolated from the world. I think that would fit in perfectly with the Nyrusin Union and gives them, again, another really cool fact. Like, it would be really cool that hasn't really been explored before. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Wood elves, potentially, with more emphasis on that sort of good nature side of things, or maybe even some of that brutality of nature. And then another faction here, which would be more about, I think, more about magic, a sort of independent city of mages, right? That's my thoughts. That's what I think. I think it's very likely. I think we look at this sort of data mine stuff. I think it is, I mean, obviously it could be faked, but I think the quality of this stuff alongside the accessories and all that, it looks pretty legit to me, to be honest. And it also fits as well with sort of other similar games like Warhammer. It's all about collecting models, very similar to Raid, which is about collecting champions. I think Wood Elves does have a potential spot in there. And I don't know. I will say I'm not crazy hyped about Wood Elves. I'd be more hyped about the other faction if it was a sort of more independent magic sort of base faction. I think that would be really fun. The Wood Elves, I'm happy for it to be in the game, but I'm not crazy about it. But yeah, I think, we put it all together with my tinfoil hat theory about the April fusion, which is obviously going to be later in April this year because of their delays, potentially being incredibly good. And yeah, there we go. Let me know what you think. Yeah, it's kind of out there, but I think there's quite a lot. There's, this is not a tinfoil hat theory without any basis. We got a lot to work on here, a lot to build on. Are you ready for a new faction? Are you hyped for it? Do you think it's time for it to be added into the game, especially to help, Raid recover after, still experiencing the war in Ukraine, which is ongoing? I don't know. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.